All right, everybody, so welcome back to another episode of Colton Posey Fishing. So today we're going to be doing something very simple. It's kind of like a beginner's guide to jerkbait fishing. Those of you who have followed my content for years, y'all understand that I use jerkbaits not only in the winter, I use them in the spring, summer, fall. But whenever you choose to run your jerkbait, there's a couple things that you need to know, and today we're going to be specifically talking about wintertime bass fishing. I'm going to show you the baits that I use, exactly how I use them to get more bites. So stay tuned, there's something you don't want to miss. All right, everybody, so talking about wintertime jerkbait fishing, there's a couple things I want you to understand. It's winter, it's cold, everything's slow, metabolisms are low. They're not going to be eating a whole lot, okay? But when they do eat, being around those fish that want to eat at the right time is definitely going to boost your confidence, and you're going to catch a lot more fish. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean if you're around fish that are, you know, not necessarily wanting to eat, that you can't trigger those bites or convince those fish to eat. It happens all the time, but it's kind of few and far between. You typically want to find those fish that are schooled up and kind of moving and hunting, looking for shad to eat. Okay, so let's talk about 3 jerk baits that I like to use. And the first one, during the winter especially, is going to be that Slash 110. This is by Thunderhawk Lures. I've been with Thunderhawk this year. I've gotten real big on their jerk baits, especially this time of year. Now, I don't throw these Slash 110s a whole lot during the summer, but during the winter and late fall, this thing has really shined this year. It's got a very subtle action to it, and it kind of rolls when you jerk that bait. Now, what I like to do, obviously it suspends, by the way, but you know, either way, what I like to do with this bait in particular is when those fish are cruising, but they're cruising up, maybe they're out here in the middle of the channel, right? But they're cruising in that, you know, 5 to 10 foot range. That's really where this one shines. Now, they've got their double deep versions, you know, like this one back here. I'm not trying to get all that untangled, but it's basically the same bait with a longer lip, go all the way down to 20 foot. But you know, I found most of the time when I'm targeting fish that want to eat, using just the regular Slash 110 is going to trigger those fish to bite, especially if they're cruising or they're close to the surface or anything like that. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be right up against the surface, but anywhere that 5 to 10 foot range, and you'll be surprised just how shallow bass get during the winter. Back at the boat, Brad here hung up one that's about 3.5 pounds right there in about 2 foot of water today, and there's icicles hanging off the trees in the back. The back of this pocket's froze, so if that tells you anything, fish will still get shallow during the winter. Moving to the next one I want to talk about, this is that Strike King KVD jerkbait. This is one I've had for a long time. It's all kind of chewed up, but you know, this is another one of those suspending jerkbaits that when you pop this bait, it's got a little bit more action to it. Although, even though it's got a lot of action, keeping your line on very, you know, slack line as you pop this will keep this bait from darting really hard like you want during the summer or during early fall or during the late spring. But keeping that slack line, barely popping that jerk bait is going to create an action that screams, I'm cold, I don't want to do this, or whatever, and the fish, they just can't stand it. Now, another one I want to talk about is the Mega Bass. Okay, so this is the Mega Bass 110 Junior. I really like the Mega Bass 110 Junior, especially if you've watched my content, you know this, especially during the spring, summer, and fall. 99% of the time, that's the one I'm going to throw, but it is okay to throw the Mega Bass 110 during the winter. Okay, there is people that is the only jerkbait that they will use during the winter, and for good reasons. They catch a lot of fish. But there's a little technique that I like to do with that is very similar to using that Strike King bait. I like very slack line to where it's almost like you can't feel any resistance as you pop your rod tip. And when you do that, that bait, instead of it shooting this far from where you popped it, it's only going to move about yay far each time, and it's going to have a real subtle action, kind of like it's fluttering or flurrying or something like that. But you're going to catch a lot more fish doing that, making those subtle presentations, those subtle actions. And obviously your setup is going to be the most important thing. This is the Thunderhawk Tyco series rod. This is the Slash version. This is made just for jerkbaits, and I absolutely love this rod. It is an expensive rod. buy whatever you can afford, but I highly suggest a moderate action rod, and the main thing is this handle. I want this handle short because as I'm popping that bait, I don't want this thing slapping my bicep or anything like that as I'm using the bait. I highly suggest going with 10-pound fluorocarbon or 10-pound mono. The only thing is you got to be very careful with monofilament. It floats, so it can bring that bait up, so you may have to get some weight strips and put that on your jerkbait. Me personally, I just run fluorocarbon. If I feel that bite, I just kind of reel into them. I try not to set the hook. So keyword, I try not to set the hook. Sometimes you get excited, but either way, 7:3 to 1 gear ratio reel. I do like that higher speed gear ratio reel. I'm not using it really for the jerkbait at all, like I would during the summer or anything like that. But with all that slack line, with that 7:3 to 1 gear ratio, I can crank on that bait and, you know, take up all that slack line super fast once I get that bite. And 99% of the time, you're going to feel that bite, even though it's slack line, because they're going to hit it and they're going to zoom with it. So, you know, you don't really have to worry about setting the hook with treble hook baits anyways. Just kind of reel into them. But we're going to hop up here on the front deck. I'm going to show you exactly how I like to use these baits. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is cotton gloves. Cotton gloves and treble hooks don't go together. But either way, we're going to throw this bait out here. And what I typically like to do, whatever area I'm targeting, once I make that cast, I'm going to do a couple reel cranks to get that bait down. Okay, once I get that bait down, then I can start working it. Now, I've got all this slack line. All this slack line, you can see my line all spiraled up. I'm not going to reel up till my line gets tight and then pop that bait. I'm actually going to leave that slack line and pop that bait just a little bit. Now, if I do go to turn my reel, I'm going to take up just enough where that line starts raising up off the water. And then once again, I'm going to pop it a couple times. And here's the key. Depending on how cold the water temperature is how long you need to let that bait sit. And it can vary from fishery to fishery. The water temperature is not the best indicator, but it can kind of give you that clue, okay? If I get under that 50-degree water temps, you know, you could pause your bait up to 30 seconds before you get a bite. That can be the key for the day. Now, another way is just play around with it. That's what I typically do. I play around, you know, those first, you know, 10 casts, I may let that bait soak for 8 or 9 seconds, and then I'll start bumping it up a little bit as I don't get bit. And then it'll eventually tell you something on how you need to fish that bait. But slack line is definitely going to be the key. I'm popping it pretty aggressive, but I'm doing it on slack line, so that bait's not moving as much as you'd think it would. Let me see if I can get the bait up here by the boat, and I'll show you what I mean. So right here, like with slack line, let me get some slack line in it. Boom. I mean, it's not moving far at all, even with me popping it that aggressive. So, you know, the slack line, make sure you're using the right line size, all that good stuff's definitely going to be detrimental. And, you know, I always say buy what you can afford, or, you know, buy whatever you're comfortable with, but I got to highly suggest the Slash. I've got to highly suggest the Strike King and the Mega Bass. All three of them have their time and place. And as those water temperatures warm up, you know, like right now through February, the Slash is definitely going to be my go-to bait. As it starts warming up a little bit, I'm going to move up to that Strike King, and as it starts getting warm, then I'm going to go up to that Mega Bass. And that's typically what I do every year, and I catch tons of fish that way. But either way, guys, if the video helps you at all, make sure to give a thumbs up. Comment down below if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free. I always put out stuff on bass fishing content. Everybody loves bass fishing content. You got to subscribe. It's free. But either way, if you got any questions, drop a comment down below. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time.